G'day guys, welcome to our YouTube channel. We've got a really special presentation for you today. We've had a lot of our viewers saying, what's going on, where are the movies coming, where are our videos being posted. For the last two and a half months, my daughter, wife and I have been working on this presentation to do with backyard permaculture, to explain what we do in our backyard to the local community. Last Friday, we all turned up, my wife Olga, Sophia and I, and we gave this presentation at Mount Waverley Garden Club. It was an absolute delight and a real privilege to be there. And because we covered so much information, we thought it might be really beneficial for some of our viewers to have a look at our garden in our design phase, so you get a bit of a conceptualization of what we do, how we plant, and what grows really well. So in this speech, unfortunately, it'll be mostly me speaking. When we had the big night, Sophia was like a ball boy or a ball girl at Wimbledon tennis. She was running back and forth with the crowds. What was some of the stuff you were giving out?
Some dahlias,
Pumpkins, chocos, some possum repellent, which will teach you how to make, a whole plethora of things. Sorry about our dogs going chopper in the backyard. So without any more ado, get comfortable, make yourself a cup of tea. I suggest you watch this video maybe in 3 parts because it is a little bit long because it's a copy of the lecture we gave to the local community. So get comfortable, get a notepad, get a pencil, and let's have some fun. As our presentation was taking place at Mount Waverley Town Hall, I really wanted to acknowledge the traditional landowners, the custodians, the Indigenous people from the Kulin Nation on the place where this presentation took place. Then I had a little bit of a chat to gardeners also for us to acknowledge our own family members, because one thing Indigenous people in Australia do really well is acknowledge their elders, past and present. Now, as gardeners, all of our gardening, our style, and what we grow is an influence on our parents and our shared knowledge. And one thing I really want to stress to the Garden Club members before we started was my garden is a bit of a hodgepodge. There's a lot going on. How I measure garden is in beautiful moments. I don't look at the entire vista and wish the whole thing was completed. I find small moments of beauty and relish them, whether it's a cushy Maya, beautiful lily in the morning light, or a really nice heritage rose that I got from my grandmother 20 odd years ago. So measure your garden in moments, not in the completion. Now, I always do a lecture overview, learning intentions. People who know our YouTube channel know this. Start off with a little bit about me and my family, which I thought it might be nice to include anyway in the recap. A quick overview on synthetic fertilizers. That means man-made fertilizers. We want to have a little look at the history of where they come from, so you actually know the history of what you're spraying on your plants. Then I'm talking about moving away from organic gardening. Now, as I said that at the lecture, I saw a lot of stressed faces, but I'm not moving away from organic gardening. I'm moving towards biodynamic gardening. So biodynamic gardening is a little bit different. I'm going to delve into that soon. Then we had a simple way to create an effective possum deterrent. People who watch our YouTube already know this, but it's really nice to show new people. Then I talk about disguising permaculture in my front garden and my design, which is pretty cool. Then it gets exciting. Then we jump into my backyard. We're looking at dot point number 6, where the magic happens. Then to round up the lecture that we did on Friday, we had 2 things. We did productive permaculture plants, number 7, and permaculture pets, things that keep our garden thriving. It's almost like the engine room of our garden where all the manure and action happens. And also it adds a really nice, delightful dynamic to your backyard. All right. A little bit about myself. If you look at me and my wife, we're a big dahlia enthusiast family. As everybody knows, I'm a primary school teacher. Now, regarding this presentation, you'll notice the little circles where the kids' faces are. I'm really passionate about not sharing other people's children's on social media. So that's just a little snapshot of me in my classroom. A couple of people who listened to our lecture on Friday didn't know about our Future Farmers podcast channel, not podcast channel, YouTube channel. Thanks, Self, just nudging me. And then a nice little joke about our favourite pet, the chickens. Now let's get into a little bit of the science behind it, because one thing about being a backyard permaculturalist or gardener, you get to really delve into the science. Now, food scientists identified 3 key elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And these 3 elements, they realized you could almost solely grow plants on. They would produce food, foliage, and enough for us to harvest, but they wouldn't grow successfully because in reality, plants need 14 nutrients and 3 elements to survive and thrive. We're not going to go through what all the elements and nutrients do, but if you're interested, just pause the video and have a look at it. The big three that gardeners really focus on is NPK. P being phosphorus, which obviously creates the blooms and encourages large fruits. Nitrogen, which is leafy growth, and potassium. Now, how I teach my children in school is the K is the kick up the bum. And what I mean by that, excuse my French, is the K refers to the overall health of the plant, and that's how you remember it. And remember, it's not okay to put K on Australian plants because our soil is really low in potassium. And as a result, our plants in Australia have evolved to have very little need for potassium. And it actually turns toxic if put on a lot of Australian natives. Now, this guy on the top right is Fritz Haber. Now, he was the German scientist who received the Nobel Peace Prize for creating synthetic man-made fertilizers. This was due to him. People for the first time in history could produce more food than they could eat. He created the abundance of farming that we know. His discovery had to do with this thing called ammonia synthesis, which is producing ammonia and from nitrogen and hydrogen and getting it out of the air. I'm not a full scientist, but what he did was absolutely brilliant. This was 1913. He was a Jewish German scientist, and the reason I said Jewish because he comes up later and actually becomes one of the biggest scientific tragedies of the world. That for some reason I've never seen covered, and I'm a school teacher, in the high school syllabus or obviously not in the primary school syllabus, but his actions in the Holocaust is really a sad story. But we'll come to that in a minute. And although he started off producing great stuff, he actually did some really horrible things, but his Nobel Prize was never removed from him, which I also find interesting as well. Now, these are the many faces of fertilizer addiction. It's a problem. The thing is, once you get really into using synthetic fertilizers, it's really hard to stop. And before people jump in the comments and say you're being really nasty, Grant, the person who is the top of the list when it comes to fertilizer obsession was me. Member of the Dahlia Society, and I'm really proud of that society. It is a beautiful club, Dahlia Society, worth looking up because you can get access to incredible plants you can't get anywhere else for ridiculously cheap prices. But once I started competing, I got really obsessed with pesticides to keep the blooms perfect and fertilizers to encourage huge blooms. The only problem is, and so I was pointing to the top right, if you're wondering what that giant red one, that's called the Winky Kernel, Australian invention. Sadly, the person who cultivated this died last year, a beautiful, beautiful man who I knew well. So as a member of the Dahlia Society, I was pumping synthetic fertilizer. I was obsessed with pesticides, but then every sequential season, my soil was getting worse and worse, and I just couldn't replicate it. So then I made the crazy mistake, and remember, I was just a young man, so don't be too harsh on me. And then I just buy more and more soil in and compound it. A lot of people out there are a lot smarter than me and realize they need to get off synthetic fertilizer a lot earlier than me. And the reason is, we're going to talk about two things, fillers and bulking. Now, companies that make fertilizer realize that the more product they sell, the more money they get. So what they do is they put a lot of fillers that a lot of people are surprised that are ground up and mixed with your fertilizer. Now, some of them are pretty harmless things like clay and sawdust, or ground corn cobs is a huge one, or sand or crushed rock. Now, things like crushed rock and ash can help with your pH, but the idea of fillers is to get less value for money, to bulk it up. Now, talking of bulkers, bulking is the other term I want you to take home today. Bulking is when there are illegal chemicals either added on purpose or usually by accident to synthetic fertilizers to bulk them up. I'm talking lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, barium. If I was you, I'd pause this and just look at the slide. I won't read the whole thing to you, but these toxic chemicals slowly contaminate the ground where our kids play, we grow our food in, and it gets accumulated. There is a belief that synthetic fertilizers kill microbes. Now, microbes refer to microscopic organisms that live in your soil. The difference between soil and dirt: soil is what you grow plants in, dirt is dead soil that you wash off your shoe, that kind of stuff. Now, microbes are essential for living life. Synthetic fertilizers do not generally kill microbes, but because there's such a narrow band of chemicals in synthetic, you get an overabundance of specific microbes that wipe out the other microbes. So instead of having billions and billions of types of microbes in your soil, you might go down to tens of thousands. So that lack of diversity causes a world of problems. And one thing worse than the death of microbes is microplastics. As a primary school teacher, when I look at what we teach at school, we talk about the ocean plastic, Great Pacific Garbage Patch, all that stuff. A lot of people know about that. But what doesn't get talked about ever, maybe because it's not cool, it's not a sexy topic, is microplastics in the soil. This journal, because as my YouTubers know, I always research everything to the hilt. If you search the assessment of agricultural plastics and their sustainability, a call for action. This is in the Journal of Food and Agriculture, put out by the United Nations last year. They found out that there's more plastics in our soil than there are in our oceans, which is unbelievable. A lot of it comes from controlled release fertilizer. I used to hit this really hard, these little granular pellets. These are in the form of a polymer or a resin coating, and it slowly dissolves over time, hence the slow release, but it leaves behind microplastics. Those of you that don't know what microplastics are, is any plastic smaller than 5 mm in length that clogs up the soil and interferes with life. So the other problem is generally the more synthetic fertilizers you use, the less types of plants you grow, and you get this monoculture. I know my dahlia patch gets very heavy in the past. I just only think I would grow with dahlias. And then you get pest problems. And then Fritz Haber comes back to your life. Now, Fritz Haber, being a German Jewish man, worked with the German government in World War One, and he moved from his focus on fertilizers to pesticides. And if you look at this historical photo, second from the left is Fritz Haber explaining how to use poisonous gas. The first thing he did was he released a chlorine-based gas in the trenches, and then he started perfecting and working on the mustard gas. His wife Clara on the left, and if you have a look, she's just there, she was so ashamed by what her husband was doing, she actually took a life on the night that he was celebrating this test. So, and then after the war, he was working on this agricultural pesticide called Zyklon B. Now, 1933, he was kicked out of Germany, being a Jewish man, and died as he moved to a new country. And his pesticides were then used in the Holocaust. So it's a really horrible story of the history of pesticides, gases generally designed to kill human beings that we then dilute and put on our food and ornamental gardens. And when you think of it like that, you can understand why we should be moving away from pesticides. Now, a lot of people would be screaming at their TV or computer saying, well, we don't live in a third world country, we live in Australia or America. Let's just focus on Australia. And I think actually we've got a worse history than America, but I cannot say that. There's 80 pesticides, according to the World Health Organization, in Australia. 80 pesticides that are banned in other countries. I'm talking ones that cause cancer, hormone disruptors, or extremely hazardous. So if you look at World Health Organization Australian pesticides, you'll see a couple of journal articles that collaborate this. And another thing I really want people to focus on is when I started gardening and I was into my dahlias, I would go for the broad spectrum. I used to love it. I used to use phrases like, I'm going to nuke everything. And a lot of young men and women probably have the same opinion. Mind you, the younger generation may be a little bit different than my generation. Really go away from broad spectrum. And the reason Bunnings is there, Bunnings sells mostly broad spectrum pesticides. Now, a broad spectrum pesticide is one that are designed to target an entire group of species. So it's like kill everything, and often they've got fungicides in them as well. So I always tell my kids, and I always lose my job when I teach permaculture because I tell children, forget the BS. If you see anything with BS or broad spectrum, run a mile. Now, one thing as gardeners, we can whinge all day about problems. Well, I need to give you some solutions. Okay. Now, one solution, and I want people, just let me finish before I finish talking about pyranthin. Now, pyranthin is a fertilizer that's made from chrysanthemum. It is a pesticide made from chrysanthemum flowers. Now, what you use it for is coop cleaning. I would never, repeat, never ever put it on crops, cherry trees or anything because it will kill bees like crazy. It's very toxic, but being from chrysanthemum flowers, it's only got a half-life of 12.9 hours, meaning you can put this in your coop, and we have 2 coops, so we put it in our coop and then we swap the chickens for 2 days and they go back to their original. And it only has a half-life of 12.9 hours before it breaks down, meaning you can use this in your chicken coop. And as we know, mites for chickens are pretty hard to break the cycle. But this will kill your mites and it won't kill everything. Another really cool thing is it's UV degradable. So if you have like rubber mats, which we use barbecue mats at the bottom of our chicken coops, where all our rubbish falls on top of our wood chips, we spray it out and then we pull out that rubber mat and then we spray that with pyranthin, leave it in the sun, but we put a cover over it so bees can't get in it, and it will accelerate the breaking down. Now, don't be mixed up with pyranthoids. Now, pyranthoids are a man-made chemical made from extracting this chemical and enhancing it. Pyranthoids are designed to have a longer half-life, up to 3 or 4 days. So pyranthin, yes, pyranthoids, no. One other thing is pyranthin is very dangerous to pollinators. Never use it outside, and really toxic. And this is, I try to find out why, but I haven't found on the internet. But just lots of warnings to do with cats. Dogs okay, but cats no. Very strange. So, and fish. Yeah, good point. So fish is prodding me. So, pyranthin for coop cleaning. It has 6 killing agents. So yes, it is a broad spectrum, but you only use it for coop. So this is really for the chicken people. Now, for the vegetable people out there, there's this one called BT, and I used to never use it because I looked at it and thought it was a scientific name. I used to, when I was younger, say anything with a big name you steer clear. But this is actually one of the best insect killers on the planet. It's a pesticide, but it's not actually a pesticide in the sense of a synthetic chemical. It's a naturally occurring bacteria that goes into the gut of, what goes on plants. Then it goes into the gut of the caterpillars, and then the acid in their stomach activates it, and it kills them inside out. Now, because it's in the foliage, it won't kill beneficial insects or bees. However, and I apologize for this because I had trouble finding an image on Google. If you see the word AIZAWI in the active ingredients, AIZAWI, it's an additive that they put in that will kill bees. So while this is a great thing to use, look at the label. If you see the Bacillus thuringiensis, I shouldn't probably even try to say that, that's what you want. But if you say, and this AIZAWI, run a mile, because that kills the bees. But this is probably the best. The next thing is, when in doubt, neem it out. Neem oil has been used by organic gardeners for ages. From my belief, the neem tree, it's an evergreen that looks like a greener version of an olive tree. And they grind it up. It's not toxic to pollinators. It kills pests and even nematodes. It interrupts their hormone system, making it harder for insects to grow and lay eggs. However, don't use this on touch crops and don't use it for your chicken coops. And the reason is it's potentially toxic as if you inhale it. And it can cause things like epileptic fits, all kinds of heart arrhythmias, I think, from memory. So never use it on a touch crop because you don't want to ingest this. And don't use it in your chicken coop because the vapor can really ruin your chicken's respiratory system. But it is an organic one and it has a really good 24 to 60 hour half-life. So it's actually really, really cool to use. So when in doubt, neem it out. And that moves to the next part. The challenge for us backyard gardeners. How do we grow healthy and nutritious food for our family without the need for pesticides and synthetic fertilizers? Now, when I was doing this lecture on Friday, I spoke of our 3-point plan. Number one, research and learn from our community and learn from our experiences of older members of our community. Join a garden club, jump on blogs, always be respectful because a lot of older gardeners know a hell of a lot more than you. And you can learn a lot more of an actual person than you can of a website. One thing I use is Facebook Marketplace. The amount of people that I've chatted to that have shown me their garden, I've learned tips along the way when buying off people, not companies, is invaluable. Then have a look at biodynamic practices. I'm going to talk about that now, but also be prepared to make truckloads of mistakes. So that's our 3-point plan. Talk to the older community, get into biodynamics, and be prepared to make mistakes. Now, biodynamics gets a bad rap. People think it's a bunch of people howling at the moon, planting by moon phases, or filling cow horns with poo. Now, I cannot dismiss moon planting. My wife and my mother-in-law swear by it. I don't necessarily believe it, but I like that our family uses it because it guarantees time and dates when we'll actually do stuff. Because I'm the laziest man in Victoria. So the moon planting for me is just a time tell to keep me on track, but my wife very much believes it. Now, biodynamic farming, and the biodynamic hoof 500 where you do fill up the cow horns, I haven't read much on that, but that's what people dismiss it with. Biodynamic is you see yourself as a custodian. Organic farming, my friends, is where you just plant it and hope for the best and say survival of the fittest. Biodynamic is you work together. It's a holistic approach where you're a custodian of the land rather than the driving force. So you're there is to help protect the soil, protect against pollutants, and balance nature out. It's a really different approach where you're not a redundant gardener, you're part of the process, which some evolutionists actually believe that humans have always played a part prior to industrialization of protecting the planet through how we grow. And that can be really learnt when you look at the indigenous style farming that the native Australians used to do in our country. They actually were the original biodynamic farmers. Now, I gave this handout out to everyone who was at the lecture on Friday. If you're really interested in what this says, I suggest you just pause it. I'm not going to go through it. It was just the pros and cons of different fertilizers. Because the garden club is made up of brilliant experienced people that we can learn so much of, and novices like myself, I just thought I'd provide some additional information to club members. But if you want to print this off, just screenshot it and print it yourself. It's pretty easy. All right, now this is the bit that everyone was here for. Now,
Start filling it.
I'll just mute myself. This was a little part of the lecture. I told the kids, not the kids, sorry, I'm a school teacher, Habit. I told the adults how to make what we believe is the best for pesticide that is organic and biodynamic, and you don't have to worry about hurting anyone. It uses tannins. Now, tannins, my friends, are a plant defense compound that has a stringent taste. If you look at the picture on the right, as my car runs over those acorns, you'll see the picture of the persimmon tree. And you often, us gardeners, used to wonder, how come the persimmons never get touched by possums? It doesn't make sense until you taste a persimmon and realize how mouth puckering it is. The persimmon is so high in astringent compounds, it makes it low in digestibility. The same with acorns. Acorns do two things. They don't get eaten much unless it's by squirrels in other countries. In Australia, they never get eaten. And they last on the ground for ages. We use ours as chicken feed, and we can store up to 2 years. Now, if you're interested in chicken feed, you've got to be very careful feeding your chickens acorns. Watch our video on our YouTube. So if you don't crush your acorns using a car, you can use a wood chipper. And wood chipper, of course, is the best. Now, don't be daunted by the price. A lot of people buy these and then they get sick of them. And we got ours on Facebook Marketplace for $35, which is ridiculous. It's not the best piece of kit on the market. But what you're seeing now is we're grinding up or running over acorns to pelletize them. Now, this is not invented by me. If you want to learn about where this is done, there's a book, and I'll give you the name. But it also was in a peer-reviewed journal in the Wildlife Society Bulletin. called condensed tannin as a deterrent to crop depredation by the white-tailed deer. And the belief is if a deer doesn't eat it with their more sophisticated gut style, a possum won't. So what we're doing here, my friends, is we're grinding up acorns, always a free resource, and then we are straining them with soaking them for 24 hours and then straining them. If you're feeding them to your chicken, don't just feed them now. There's one more step. You've got to soak them twice, but I suggest you watch our video. We've been doing this for years, so you can see the chickens know what the go is. And what you're seeing here is you just get a little strainer. If you don't know where to get them, we got ours for $3 from a fishing shop, believe it or not, for people when they're catching sandworms. So we got it for like $3 from just a fishing shop. We found it the cheapest. Now this is the golden brew. This is the water where the acorns have been soaked for 24 hours. If you're feeding it to your chickens, soak them twice to get all the tannins out. But the first batch of water is the pesticide. Now this pesticide, that's just reference to the thing at the bottom. This pesticide you can put straight on your plants, but if you want to enhance the half-life, 70% of this fluid mixed with 30% milk, spray it, and the milk works as an adhesive. Spray it on your plants that have been hit by possums, and you'll be surprised how effective it is, because it lowers the digestibility of leaves, meaning the animal can't access the nutrients, A, and B, the taste is disgusting. And if you want more on this, get the book Current Development in Biotechnology and Bioengineering by Dr. Ezra Rao. Just go back, pause this, search for this, a beautiful book on biodynamic processes. So yeah, so this is using tannin. We would never use it on flower buds. Being a mold agent as well, we're actually going to try using this instead of copper sulfate this year on our peach trees. Just because I really just don't trust copper sulfate, but I should, because a lot of people are smarter than they use it. But as an antifungal properties, we're going to give it a try this year and make a video to see if it actually helps powdery mildew. Our initial trial on dahlias has been successful, but the difference between mildew on a dahlia versus the mold on a peach tree, which we all know is dramatic. Okay, and that, my friend, is the golden brew. Now we brought out about 50 tubs of this to the last garden club. If you're with Mount Waverley Garden Club, I'll bring another batch next meeting, and anyone that's interested who missed it is more than welcome to get one. All right, yeah, and just reminding you, if you're doing it for the chickens, do it again and repeat. And you notice the second strain, you don't use the water, but that's only if you want to feed your chickens acorns. All right. Now we're nearly getting about 2/3 through. This is our house when we bought it. It was unassuming and it was pretty much a blank canvas. Now we gave everyone this map when we did our speech. This is our garden, front garden. We've got 22 miniature dwarf, super dwarf peach trees. You've got the dwarf sunset and pixie. The reason we plant this at the moment is for the beautiful pattern. But remember, super dwarf rootstock gives you options for grafting in the future. At the meeting, I said I want to encourage all gardeners to break the law as much as possible. And what I mean by that is big plant corporations have bought the rights to different rootstocks, meaning as gardeners, you can't just buy general rootstocks often. You have to buy a tree, but as gardeners, we can graft whatever we want as long as it's compatible plants. Now we've got actually more than this. We've got about, I think, 16 different citrus, and we've grafted them ourselves. I'm talking pomerellos, nara, red grapefruits, things you can't get in stores. And we grafted onto this thing called flying dragon rootstock. I suggest everyone remembers that. You can buy that directly from a place called Delaney Fruit Trees in Australia. Search flying dragon rootstock. That is the best rootstock, in my opinion, for citrus, with the exception of the Australian finger lime, which needs trifoliata. So if you have flying dragon, get into it. Now, if you've got a concrete expanse north facing like us, don't stress. You can use it to grow stuff you generally can't grow in your area because it creates a microclimate. And we have a lot of success. We've got about 6 of them of K apple, a tough drought hardy fruiting plant. Fruit doesn't taste that good, but it's still edible, so just mix it with your jams. Lastly, in our garden patch, none of us can afford a $25 allium bulb. So we use elephant garlic, bulking up our tulips, and people just think they're alliums, they're good for the bees, and then you can eat the garlic later. So remember, onions, garlic, too tough for the veggie patch. Get them in your ornamentals, because amongst the tulips, they look epic with their little spires. All right, now we're starting to move into the backyard. Now, our backyard was influenced by two ways. I'm a big fan of the British garden called Sissinghurst. It's this romantic tussle of these guys, Vita and Harold. Now, Vita was obsessed with as many plants as possible. Harold was obsessed with classical gardens. So it's a garden of straight lines divided into rooms. Each room has a different feel, but there's this romantic tension between these two when they were alive, where one would want the crisp, clean rose, the other one would want an abundance of life. And it has this real nice tension. Now, this is where our garden gets wacky. My wife, being a Siberian Russian, had a dacha. If you have a look at this map here, and the dacha was a summer farm that had to have a single-story house, no heating, and had to be less than 25 meters because the government did not want people living in the countryside. They wanted them in the factories during the Soviet times. So my wife, until 2002, had this beautiful summer house dacha, and it was full of fruiting fruit trees. I'm talking black currants, red currants, raspberries, and so our garden has to be. And my wife's got all these beautiful stories of her in a family dacha each summer working the soil. So I wanted this formal garden mixed with this earthy, canopied, dappled light, fruit tree alley kind of feel. So that's what we're working with. This is the overall plan of our backyard. You'll see the top left, the beehives, and you'll notice everything's in straight lines. I've talked a lot about this on the YouTube channel. You'll notice I've got dwarf almonds, like Price, really close to the sitting area, the centralized sitting area, because they flower first. So it drags you out of the house a lot earlier to appreciate beauty. You'll notice I've got espaliers using all the fences. The top ones, Feijoa and guavas, they like cooler feet. So the shade from the veggie patch cools the lower half of them, which makes them grow better. You'll see like a little tea house near the Venus de Milo statue. We actually haven't built that yet. That's on my to-do list this year. Then we've got the tamarillos in deep shade. And then you'll notice the columnar apples. We've got 30 columnar apples and we use them as hedging, but I'm going to talk about that later. One thing you'll notice about our backyard is we have 2 chicken coops and 1 quail coop. We completely free range. So the idea in our garden is for our chickens to constantly walk around the perimeter of our veggie patch and amongst our espaliers. My YouTube channel is all about this, but we have 100% free range. So we can't grow everything we want in our backyard, but 100% free range, and they're one of our frontline defenses against pests. All right. Now, a lot of people get annoyed at my garden because it's too much, but remember, your garden is your playground. Experiment, play, have fun, because this is your space, and it's a judgmental-free zone. Occasionally on YouTube, I get some really horrible things. One guy said I'm a professional gardener, and you don't have a fundamental understanding of plants, which is fine, it's his opinion, but it didn't upset me because it's my backyard, my place, and it's my fun. When we moved to our backyard, it was pretty much had a hills hoist, which is an Australian type of washing line, and it was very bare. A quick tip for you, this is just satellite view on Google. If you go to your satellite view Google, every 2 to 3 years a fresh picture, and you, my friends, can use that as a shadow map. So look at each satellite view over the years, and you can actually see where the deep dark shade is, and you might find some little microclimates you didn't know existed. We knew our backyard was like a caravan park. It was pretty sparse. And one thing about gardening is enjoy the moments. Don't worry, you've got years of work in front of you. So we said, while our backyard looks like a caravan park, let's enjoy it. We all camped out there, we had friends over, and we enjoyed it because we knew before long the hills hoist would be gone. Fruit trees we would never chop down. We're not maniacs. We may move them, but we'd never chop them down. But we made the most of it. And that's a little tip for gardeners. Don't be upset about what's not there. Enjoy what is there. It was dominated by fences, really good wood fences because they're old wood fences, but very black. And it was quite overwhelming. I just sit there going, what to do. So our tip was start one room at a time. So we focused on alongside our house using our daily knowledge. We put scoria down, a watering system, then 6 inches of compost and 6 inches of good quality dirt that wasn't there. And then we worked on that area first and we created a dahlia room. And it creates this really nice little vista, I think the word is, from outside our dining room. And what's really cool is towards the end of the season, it turns pretty ugly. So prepare yourself, brace yourself, because we grow chocos, raspberries, I just turned the sound off, and passion fruits. So when the dahlias go back, they kick in, and it becomes this really cool kind of jungle, which is a lot of people would freak out at. But what's beautiful about this jungle is because it's the only area of bare dirt in our backyard, just about, we open it to the chickens and then we let them do their thing in it. And then in about 3 weeks, and if you looked at how crowded it was before, here's a couple of trips in here, you'll start noticing, I should turn that volume off, you'll start noticing these guys come in and do all the weeding for us. I don't pull anything out. All that's left is my dahlias, and you can see some really stray sticks, and I'll dig them up and divide them and store them. And they do all the hard yucca for me, and they have fun, and they pay us with eggs. So this is a really productive shaded area of our garden where we get abundance of fruit and blooms. We feed our chooks. It's basically their scratching area, and then we get some good stuff. So we'll keep moving. So task 2, we want to plant an espalier orchard on a budget. Now, if you're a Victorian Australian or New South Wales, one of the saddest things we see time and time again in our community is houses being bulldozed. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 36,300 homes were demolished in Victoria from 2016 to 21. And because I'm speaking at Mount Waverley Garden Club, sadly, we were the most demolished suburb in Victoria and actually in Australia, followed by Glen Waverley, Doncaster and Bentley. We're about 300 more homes in Victoria than New South Wales, which I thought is interesting. But with all the destruction in our community, where it's replaced by townhouses, all these mansions, these colossal things with no backyards, all these opportunities of getting beautiful grape trees that you can, or grape vines. Often people put them as grape trees, so you search for both. And a lot of our plants we've got for free or under $50. And for instance, if you've got a mature 10-year-old pomegranate tree and it's 2.2 meters, if it's 10 odd years, you can guarantee it's probably on dwarf rootstock. So you can make some really educated guesses based on the age of the tree. And a lot of our plants are reclaimed, and it's something I'm really passionate about. All those beautiful Australian, Australian Greek families whose grandparents had these amazing backyards. We've got to save as much of this as possible. This is our backyard. Our goal is A, to free range, and B, to try to have this lush paradise where we can sort of escape from. And this is just the feel of our garden. Well, it is our garden. Our little tip is if you mow a path, chickens will follow them, which is sort of hard to believe, but you'll see now. So our backyard is our little paradise where we relax, we chill out, and we surround ourselves with greenery. Okay, now there's that really good Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best is now. So we planted our garden on a budget. And if you have a little look, this is my daughter Sophia. This was taken a couple of days ago working on our espaliers. Now, that wire is just $20 for, I think, 60 meters clothesline from Bunnings. We started off with bookends, believe it or not, and then we upgraded to these things where Soft's hand is. If you have a look, there you get them from Tractor Supply stores for electric fences where you mount electric fences, and they're 25 to 75% each, and they just screw it into the solidest part of your fence. So our goal was to get this planted ASAP. We had no money, of course, because we just bought a house. And we're going to concrete post in, do it professionally, but get the plants in first and get the shape. In our backyard, the first 2 column rows are for the chickens. We never net them or worry about them, and the rest is for us. Now, if you have a little look and compare This is just our green wall. You've seen this from our other YouTube videos if you've watched it, but it's nice to see this same place in summer versus winter. To make our walls look better, we just use these cheap little pot plants, and we use ranunculi. It's a real good lazy man's flower, good for the bees, and when they die back, you just put the whole entire pot behind your garage and then get it again next season out. Because we've got these little corns, which are like miniature claw-shaped bulbs. So yeah, if you have a little look, Soph loves her espalier. She's amazing at it. It's like a bonsai for her in the sense that it's really meditative, it's really relaxing, but also provides food. And it's just a little example of a duck eating my hand and Soph working on it. But I really encourage, the thing about espalier is you will make mistakes, but fruit trees are ridiculously forgiving. And worst case scenario is, yeah, you lose a bit of fruit each year, but you get better and better. So don't worry about fruiting spurs, don't worry about shape and form, just have a play, because that's what gardening is about. And the next thing we had to do was our vegetable patch. But we knew if we had a vegetable patch that was straight in the soil, we'd have all kinds of problems in the shape of the chickens would smash it. So we had to build a fence around it, which was an excuse for us to use H3 treated eco-safe wood and build our veggie patch. Now I was really proud of this. I called Soph and Olga out and said, look what I built. Actually, that's a lie, called Olga out. Soph built the whole thing with me, 100%. And I said, look what we built. Olga came out, my beautiful wife, and said, Grant, it looks like a bloody cemetery. And then once I saw that, I can't stop looking at this little cemetery in our backyard. So I had to put a picket fence. But before we look at the picket fence, now my YouTubers know this from our videos of my love of quail. Quail comes up in Egyptian iconography all the time, and historians are starting to learn that Egyptians used the quail as a natural pest repellent. So this is where this lecture got a little bit weird. But what was amazing about the garden club is they didn't freak out, they just went for the ride and enjoyed it. So hopefully YouTubers will too. So we'll come back to the quail in a minute. Now I had to put a fence around to stop it looking like a cemetery. One lady did call out, it now looks like a cemetery with a fence around, which I thought was hilarious, and it sort of did. So we built the fence with the help of my father-in-law, Vladimir, who was stuck at us with COVID because he couldn't get home back to Russia. So I put him to work. Hi Vlad, if you're watching. And then we planted out. Now this was our first year of planting. And I really apologise for the density of planting. It was such a rookie mistake. I'm not an expert in gardening. I'm just here to show you what I do and what I love about gardening. So our veggie patch, and you'll notice the quails rent our veggie patch. They do 3 to 4 days a week in here and the rest in their normal coop. And because quails are petrified of aerial predators, occasionally they'll get into flower beds, but they're pretty tame. You just give them a pat and say out. And they're living with strawberries. And if they're not eating strawberries, they're probably not going to eat much. The trick is only have one male, mostly females. Females are obsessed with protein. If you have a look at the bird right, it'll jump. You just saw it jump, trying to eat bugs because they are obsessed with protein because they pump out so many eggs. And as I mentioned, scared of aerial predators, so they won't generally be in your garden bed. And this is another layer of defense. That's a boy crowing, pretty cool over there. Another layer of defense against the bugs. I just want to show you our results after our first year of gardening. And we just, because we grow indeterminate tomatoes, we continue to harvest bulbs, dahlias, to get cabbages without any netting. I know they're not the best cabbages, but that's pretty hard to do in Victoria in the summer. Some nice squashes. That's the roses were for the veggie patch on the dahlias, and I put them there for effect. And we were just, well, yeah, it's some good eggs. We were just pulling this out, and that's about every 2 or 3 days the harvest we're pulling out of our garden. And remember, we have garlics and stuff in our front garden. The next challenge was we had to create a living space which matches the feel of the house. Now, one thing you got to remember, we've got a 1960s home. We can't just have a modern, chic kind of area. We had to somehow create something with a nod to the past that doesn't clash. So just like any good dad, you get your daughter out working. More skills you can give her, the better. I just almost told you a story about how I tried enrolling my daughter in a high school and asked, my daughter is really, really good at woodwork and metalwork. And this principal said, their boys' subjects we don't do them here. And this was Sacred Heart. Oh no, I shouldn't mention the school. It was a school in our area, and I was horrified. In this day and age, girls should be working with their family members, getting as many skills as they can. And my daughter is an absolute gun with the tools. And after about 5 weeks' work, my daughter and I created this really cool paving area. We now have more lavenders growing around it, but it came up really cool. The quote was $900 stone, which we bought, but then we tried to pay someone to do it, but the cheapest quote was $1,200, so we did it ourselves. And if you're wondering what this is, my friends, this is Irish strawberry. We got two 2-metre trees for $74 on Facebook Marketplace. Absolute bargain. Doesn't taste that good, but it's a nice shade producer, and they just feed it to your chooks. All right, we're coming to the end of our lecture. We've got 3 of our favourite plants you may not have thought of growing. The first of these sticks in the ground. These are columnar apples. I would never ever espalier an apple again. We've only got one. Oh well, we've got 6 in the front espaliered apples, but 1 in the backyard. But I would never espalier an apple again because of columnar apples. Now these motley apples on the right hand side with a terrible iPhone charger coming through it was a photo that I took. And it wasn't a very good photo, but I actually thought it was actually more important than a polished one. This is actually apples that we harvested off this row, 18-month-old bare-rooted plants, straight from the nursery. So 18 months, that many apples, which is pretty mind-boggling, and they're good sizes. Now, we use our columnar apples to divide up our garden. And columnar apples are magnificent. We've got 30 of them, and we've got 3 walls separating 3 rooms. If I was you, I'd pause this and just read, because I'm not going to go through it, but one thing I really want to tell you is, oh my giddy aunt, these guys are the most drought-hardy fruit-producing trees on the planet. We use a lot of tank water for irrigation, but we almost never water them, and they hold on to their leaves. This was taken this week, and we've only got 1 week left of winter, and it's been the coldest winter in my living memory, and some still have leaves hanging on. Not many, to be honest, but they hold their leaves longer than any fruit tree in our garden that's not evergreen, of course, and they make a really good divider. Another thing is they don't go more than 60 millimeters, and that's both sides added, so 600 millimeters. So we use them to divide. I suggest pause and read if you want more information. The next of my super favorite is pawpaw and the babco. Now, in Australia, we say pawpaw. Some people say papaya, and it's one of those things that gets people in trouble. So I'm not going to discuss that. Now, the babco are the easiest of these to grow. And I have to keep them to it because my ducks make so much noise in the background. They're the easiest of them to grow, but a lot of fruit tree companies are now trying to graft pawpaw on the babco. I don't know much about that. If you're in Victoria, which is a pretty cold, which is probably apart from Tasmania, it's the coldest state in Australia. We have mountain pawpaw, male and female. You need both that grow, and they're amazing fruiting. They taste better than the babco, but the babco makes one of the best jams on the planet. We grow this for 2 reasons. Number one, it's a great food producer, and you get a lot of winter fruit, but also the seeds from the pawpaw are really good wormers. And this has been collaborated in 2 studies recently, in 2007, where they used children. It was in Nigeria, where they used pawpaw seeds as an alternative to synthetic. In fact, 71% of children had reduced or no parasites. And another one in 2014 where they used it in goats. But it's been known, my wife's family know about it, and they've been doing it as well for years. Hot frost hits these guys bad, but they always bounce back. So yeah, if you want more, just pause and read, but yeah, it's amazing. The next one that is an absolute winner, my friends, is the Tamarillo. Now the Tamarillo, you will find absolutely covered in bugs. Don't plant this near a veggie patch. But my friends, that's the point. Tamarillo, being a member of the Solanaceae family, has really low digestibility, meaning insects like caterpillars will jump on a leaf, and instead of like eating it in the whole day like it would a cabbage, it will munch so slowly. It'll slow down its metamorphosis by up to 2 or so weeks, meaning the beneficial bugs like your lacewings, which is, you'll see the bug here, and your ladybirds have a chance to catch up. We have about 16 of these plants, and we use them as ladybird farms, and lacewings, meaning when with our roses and stuff, we'll wait till this is full, and then my daughter will walk around and she'll easily get 20 ladybirds and move them to our roses, and that gets rid of our aphids. Because aphids are more seasonal when they grow, whereas tamarillos grow all year. So you've got this unlimited supply of beneficial insects. They are brittle. If you want more information, press pause. Remember the letter K on the keyboard. K is pause. Have a little read, but they're cool. Now we've got 3 slides left. We did 3 pets, and these, my friends, are Muscovy ducks. Our favourite type of duck that is often underrepresented in permaculture. And yes, that's the one that's making that noise. Now, Muscovy ducks are brilliant. They lay up to 180 eggs per year. They're heavy layers, not really affected too much by temperature or daylight hours. They have oil glands on their cankles, that's those red things, and one on their belly, but so low it means they cannot sit in water all day like other ducks. So they can't spend their whole life in water. So a kiddie pool will suffice. You'll notice we have a lot of giant ceramic bowls under our fruit trees. We fill them up with water, and then at the end of every couple of weeks, we decant that out, and it's really ready-made, almost fertilizer, liquid fertilizer. They're amazing. And one thing, a study that was done in Canada found that a Muscovy duck catches 30 times more flies than several commercial fly traps. So these guys produce a lot of eggs. They keep the fly count low. If you're a bit cheeky and got too many chickens and you're a bit worried about your neighbours, keep them down low. One other thing I love about them is they break pecking orders, meaning you can have silkies, you can have bantams, you can have any type of chicken living together, because generally the Muscovy will be at the top of the pecking order, but not interested in enforcing law and order. So they're like a benevolent dictator. They're in charge, but they don't cause any drama, which is crazy. There's a couple more facts there. Just remember to try not to have a male drake with your chickens. Mind you, at the garden club, we had a lady come up and say she's got truckloads of male drakes, no problem. But some of my friends have had problems. So that's a bit for debate. Let's go to our next one. This is the bantam chickens. Now, true bantam chickens you want to look for, not regular bantams. True bantam chickens are chickens that are miniature by nature, and there's no smaller counterpart. Now, we have our top 4, I'll just mute that. Our top 4 bantam breeds are Silkies, Belgian Duckels, Pekin, and the last one here is Japanese Bantam. I'm going to scroll down before you see her. They are great. Now, with the exception of the Silky, that's the one with the big funny haircut in the top right, Bantams appear more intelligent than other breeds, and this is due to their lack of survival bred traits. They can't fly, they can't run, so they really interact with humans more and rely on us more. If you've got children or grandchildren, I'd get these. They almost do no damage to your garden compared to a white Sussex, compared to a giant breed. We even don't care if they sneak into our veggie patch or dahlia patch when we've shut it off. They do with the exception of the Silky, they do like to get in your trees and stuff, but they eat so little, there's not much to worry about that. They are 30% the size of a regular chicken, so be careful in heat if they go broody, because that's the only time we've ever lost one, was it went broody and then suffered from dehydration. Yeah, so really get one. And yes, they only do 120 eggs per year, but if you got four of these, you got over 400 eggs a year. Like, how many eggs do you need, honestly? Yeah, so really worth getting. And obviously their poop makes excellent manure. Now, the last pet profile I really want to get into and share with you guys is bees. My giddy aunt, we love bees. No, they're not pets, and we love to believe they recognize us as beekeepers. A lot of people say that's not true, but I'm going to keep the lie alive and pretend my bees love me. Now, the thing about this video I really want to show you is bees and chickens are unlikely best friends. Bees get a lot of bad rap. for being aggressive and swarming. That's definitely not true in Australia. We do not have African bees because apparently that's a sub variety that's more aggressive. And our bees are in our sitting area, and we eat dinner out there most nights in summer and during daylight savings, and they're everywhere. And we've never ever been stung. Um, and the chickens love them. And there's a lot of studies that show there's less hive beetle if you have chickens around. And one thing that's really weird I find with bees and chickens is, especially the older hens that would be considered spent hens, but we don't believe that in our garden. They all have some purpose, is the older chickens actually sleep during the day outside the hives. And by eating the dead bees only on the floor, it helps a lot with hygiene, meaning you've got healthier bees, less hive beetle. Now that's not varroa mites, don't be mistaken for that, less hive beetle. Okay, so yeah, so bees and chickens are amazing companions, and I was sort of hoping, I thought this video had an older chicken sleeping, but I think we missed that. But yeah, and if you have a look at behind the beehive, that beautiful foliage, that is our persimmon, because we have an autumn garden. Oh yeah, and there's an older hen, just an example of how they sleep next to the hive. It's pretty awesome. Now bees are amazing, and this is our last slide, and we really recommend you get them. I'm not going to go through all this because I'm conscious of time, but the bees are magnificent in the garden. An average hive produces 18 kilograms, and you can get up to 45 kilograms from a strong hive. I've never had that, but that's what they say. Local honey cures hay fever. They're less aggressive. Now, do not buy a flow hive. A lot of people get annoyed when I say that. I've tried it. I got sucked in, I'm not going to lie, and realized they are an absolute disaster. If you want more information on that, just go to our YouTube channel, which you're obviously on, and watch our video on that. It changes you as a gardener if you get into bees, because you can start noticing flowers that are flowering in different times of the year, and it really changed my gardening style. Moved away from closed blooms to prolific blooms, which helps everyone. And yeah, get to know people. I've made some great friends through beekeeping. All right, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you, Mount Waverley Garden Club, for having me. Hopefully we can keep that relationship and I can do one in the future. It's been an absolute delight sharing my information with you. Have a great day. Thank you. Goodbye. And don't forget to like and subscribe.